All right, good evening, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and start here. Don't want to waste any more time. We're so thankful that everybody's here tonight. Thank you so much for joining. We're really looking forward to this class tonight. This is obviously some very important topics that we're going to be discussing tonight. But just thank you again for being here. And we want to thank Chad so much for being here, for being a part of this class and preparing for us, and we'll be doing this lesson for us. And we really appreciate him. And Scott will say a little bit more about Chad here in just a second. I wanted to go ahead and say very quickly, if we could make sure everybody is muted in the bottom left corner of your screen. If you're on a computer, it's there's a microphone. If you would go ahead and mute, we don't want any unnecessary noise coming through during the session. So please go ahead and mute yourselves if you can. And that way we can be free from any distractions. We do really appreciate you being here again. And again, we're thankful for Chad being here. I'm going to open us up with a prayer, and then Scott will have a few words. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you so much for everything, Father. You are the great God, the great King above all gods. And we thank you for tonight, for us allowing us to be together, even though it's a virtual meeting, Father. We're thankful that we're going to be able to learn on these important topics. And we praise you for everything, Lord. And we thank you for Jesus. We pray this in his name. Amen.
Hey, Tucker, thanks. And like you, I don't want to take any of Chad's time away at all either. Chad, thank you so much for being on. Chad and I met just a few years ago, I would say quite by providence. Chad is a banker from Central Florida. He is a senior VP and chief information officer for the Citizens Bank and Trust based out of, I think it's Lake Wales, Florida there, and is on the faculty of the Graduate School of Banking at Louisiana State University, which the Alabama Bankers Association is one of 15 states that hosts that nearly 70-year-old school, I think. Long story short, I sat in a presentation for a guy that I didn't know named Chad Tagtow, and quite by providence, the next morning at breakfast, I quickly figured out, and I think he did too, that we were church members, and we became friends. He is, in my opinion, an expert on not only information, but he is a strong and faithful Christian, a very mindful father and husband, and it's been a delight to get to know him. When we talked as an eldership about some of the challenges we all face with social media, I thought about Chad. And so we reached out to Chad as an eldership, and he very kindly agreed to spend some time with us tonight and next Wednesday. So Chad, welcome. Thank you. Wish it were in person, but glad to see you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be with you all, and I do wish that it could be in person, but I think we'll just take advantage of technology, and this is one of the good things about technology we'll take advantage of this evening. And I appreciate those kind words that Scott said there. So to tell you just a couple other things about myself, I'm a deacon at the Orange Street Church of Christ, and I also do some part-time preaching. I'm on the board of directors at the Florida School of Preaching and the Daily Apologist, and so I've been in information security my whole business career, and so kind of combined those that knowledge and experience of what's out there combined with my desire to guide my children towards heaven. And I have 3 children. I have a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 10-year-old. And so I'm very mindful of what's going on in their lives when it comes to technology. So I'm going to share my screen here so we can begin this presentation, and hopefully you guys can see that. It should be up, I believe. There we go. Okay. So there are several things we're going to look at covering this evening. Talk a little bit about technology, the technology in general. We're going to look at the responsibility that parents have in this environment. We're going to try to gain a little perspective on things and look specifically at some of the issues that surround social media that we need to be concerned about. and then some suggestions. One of the difficulties in preparing this class was I knew that there was going to be a mixture of both teens in this class as well as the parents. And so this is not geared towards one entirely. There's some portion of parents. And so as the teens are sitting here listening at the first part, when we start talking about parents' responsibility, I want you to think about the weight that your parents have upon them and the responsibility that's been given to them. So when we talk about technology, sometimes there's a tendency to immediately just demonize it. But technology is neither inherently evil or good. And so we must be mindful of how we're going to use this tool. Not to overreact and decide that we're going to go the way of the Amish and have nothing technology in our entire house, or vice versa, just be completely and entirely permissive and throw our children to the wolves and let them just go and fend for themselves in this world. And all manner of social media platforms we may be referencing tonight. Facebook is probably the one that is the most well known, especially among the parents' generation. But we'll be talking more about TikTok and Instagram, some brief mention of Twitter, YouTube, and perhaps Snapchat if time permits. So when we look at the parents' responsibility, I'm drawn to Deuteronomy chapter 6. The first two verses of Deuteronomy chapter 6 starts out, "Now this is the commandment, and these are the statutes and judgments which the Lord your God has commanded to teach you, that you may observe them in the land which you are crossing over to possess, that you may fear the Lord your God and keep all his statutes and his commandments, which I command you, you and your son and your grandson, all the days of your life, and that your days may be prolonged." Now, this is obviously in reference to the Israelites as they are going to inherit the promised land, but the instruction that's given here to them is about teaching their children and their grandchildren. And specifically down in verse 6 and 7, really the weight comes there, because the instruction to these parents are, "And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up." And so as a parent, the responsibility that we have, and this is, and I realize the parents understand this, but our goal is to return our children back to God. They are a gift from God to us, and it's our job to return them back to God and to teach them about God and to teach them his commandments and his ways and his statutes. And to do so, and if you look at those timeframes there, we're doing so diligently. We're doing so when they wake up. We're doing so then when we're in the house, when we're sitting, when we're walking by the way, when we're lying down, the whole time, every bit of it. One of the things, though, that is a struggle is children, teens especially, they need boundaries. And they may say that they don't like them. And the teens that are probably listening are probably not overly thrilled at the prospect of boundaries being placed upon them, but they need them. Not only do they need them, they want them. It provides them security. Now they may say, "Oh, let me do what I want to do," but it really provides the guidance and the security and the protection that they need. When you're on the internet, there are all manner of things that are out there. And as we're trying to protect our children, if we allow them to just go freely without any sort of guidance, without any sort of assistance, they're going to be exposed to things that we have not been exposed to, nor would we want to be exposed to, nor do we want our children to be exposed to. And you can't unsee something. And so we have to be mindful of what we're allowing them to be exposed to. So I want to ask a question. I want you to think for a moment, what's a bad kid look like in your mind, and what's a great kid look like? Now, I use that on purpose, and I'll explain here in just a moment. But if I said, think about a bad kid, pick in your mind what the traits, what they look like, what they act like, what's a bad kid look and act like? And maybe you're sitting here thinking about them. You may even think about a bad kid maybe that you might consider. that you might know, and they're in all manner of evil. And then you think about a great kid. Now, and you think about what they're involved in, you think about what they're focused on. I'd like to pose you a question. What's the difference between the bad kid and the good kid? Right? Like, I would submit to you, there is no bad kid, there is no good kid, right? The difference, it's not genetics. It's not that this kid over here is inherently bad and this child over here isn't. It's what they are exposed to and what they participate in. So when you think about that as a child, what that the child that is the bad kid, so to speak, in society's mind, or perhaps in your mind, it's because of what they've been exposed to in their life and what they participate in. And the difference between those two is that's just that it. So when we look at technology, what are we exposing our children or permitting our children to be exposed to, right? And what are we permitting them, encouraging them, for instance, to participate in? So here's a couple other questions. Now, I have where up there twice. That's not a typo, that's on purpose. So when you ask the question, so if I ask you the question, I want you to answer this question for you. This is a rhetorical question, so obviously I can't have everyone give me the answer, but I want you to think about this. Where does your teen go on the web? Where? Right, so you think about the internet, you think about the web, everything is there, right? The best of the best, the absolute, the very best that you could find in the world is represented on the web. The very worst of the worst is represented on the web. And some of the things that are out there shock, like I was aware of things that are out there. So I had to do part of what some of the research that I've had to do for some of the classes that I've taught. I've had to look online and go to places like the dark web and whatnot and try to find different things to see what's out there and how criminal elements work. And I was absolutely shocked beyond measure at the things that you can find and buy. It is anything and everything, the worst of the worst. You could, I mean, there was a section where I found from a reputable site amongst criminals where you could actually purchase human beings. I mean, things that I was beyond belief. I couldn't think. So where does your teen go? The very best of the best, the very worst of the worst? Do you know? I would submit to you that you should ask them. Ask them where they're going. What are you using? What are you doing on the internet? Where are you going? What apps are you using? What websites are you visiting? What things are you consuming? What are you doing there? And then also not only ask them, but also inspect, to identify, to go and look and to see. And so this session is not going to be down in the weeds talking about how to inspect or how to look at some of those things, because you can spend hours talking about one app on one platform, but you need to know where your children are going and you need to know what apps they're using. You need to ask them and you need to inspect. The second where is, where does the web go with your teen? So I can't tell you the number of selfies that I have seen of girls doing duck faces in a bathroom. I know that the phone goes with them into the bathroom. I know that the phone goes with them into their bedroom. So do we, like as parents, is it acceptable? Would you let your child have someone of the opposite gender in your child's bedroom alone with them? And the answer is no, I would not do that. I would hope the answer would be no, right? And so if the answer is no, then why do we allow it virtually? If you allow it virtually. And so I think sometimes parents think, well, my kid's a good kid, they wouldn't do those things. Well, that's true. Your child may be that good kid, right? But what makes a good kid or a bad kid? It's what they are exposed to and what they participate in. And so that's where we have that role. So the first where is, where are they going? The second where is it coming to them? Where are they at? The third one is when, right? So when does your teen go on the web? When does your teen use apps? When does your teen, is it 2 a.m. in the morning? Right. So I liken it sometimes. We have to think about things from the perspective of when we grew up as parents. And so I saw some of the folks that were joining, and there are folks that are, I mean, I'm a Gen Xer is what I am. But there are folks on this that are baby boomers. There are folks that perhaps may even be of the silent generation, the traditionalist generation, depending on what you refer to it as. But your parents probably, if they were involved in caring, your parents probably did not let you go to the local dive bar at 2 a.m. or go hang out by the strip club at 2 a.m. That did not occur because your parents were concerned. They wanted to know where you're at. They wanted to know what you were doing. So as parents, why would we let our children have virtual free reign to go to these places and not know where they're at, not know when they're there, and not know what's going on? What's out there? I talked a little bit about it, but these are some interesting statistics. So this is from a study that was done by Bark, which is a software company that helps manage children and teens online, helps manage their apps and monitoring and whatnot. 94% of teens said they either expressed or experienced violent content or subject matter. 66% of teens engaged in conversations about depression. 82% either experienced bullying or did bullying their own. 91% of them had conversations surrounding drugs and alcohol, right? And so if you're listening to these, you're like, well, not my child. Well, think about, it's 94%, it's 66%, it's 82%. 66% of teens were involved in some sort of self-harm or suicidal situation where they were involved with online. They knew somebody who was self-harming, knew someone who was talking about or experienced suicide. Sexual content. In fact, if there's any statistic in this list, this is the one I probably think is low, is 87.9% of teens said they encountered nudity or content of a sexual nature. I think that's low. And this is the environment in which we are allowing our children to go online. Now, this is obviously the worst of it, right? So it's, again, at the very beginning, it's not all bad and it's not all good. We have to be aware of what's out there and what impact it has upon us. And so the whole purpose of this class is on social media. So let's look at social media, right? Here's the question. How much do you pay to use social media per month? Think about the social media platforms. How much do you pay per month? And I can tell you, I know what the answer is. It's nothing. It's free. It's free, 90 free. Why is it free? Right? If you are not paying for the product, you are the product. I'm going to repeat that again. If you're not paying for the product, you are the product. You're the one that's being sold. You're the one that's being used in this environment. Now, you may think, well, I'm getting something out of it. I'm having some connections with friends, or I'm able to keep up with Grandma Sally and what's going on, or she's able to keep up with what's going on with the grandkids. There are some things that are good there, right? But if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. They're not doing this out of the kindness of their hearts, that they want to bring families together and that they're so altruistic. That's not the reason. It is because you are the product. So let's look at some of the issues with social media. The first issue with social media is everything that you put online, every click, every site that you go to, every picture you post, every word you type, all of that information is gathered by big tech, and all of that is compiled together, every bit of it. Now, all of that information, you're like, well, who cares? People sell all of their privacy. So there was an expectation of privacy in previous generations. There really is no expectation of privacy in this current generation. And so information is gathered by big tech. And so it's not only gathered by big tech, but it's also gathered by strangers. One of the things that I do in the class that I teach at the Graduate School of Banking at LSU is I will show what information people share. And I will go online and I will go and research someone and say, oh, here's your wife's name. and here's what her birthday is, and here's when you guys were married. Congratulations, just celebrated an anniversary. Here's how many children you have, and here's where they go to school. And by the way, I really like your nice red car that you have. And I tell them all this information, and man, it is creepy. And it took me all of 10 minutes to find this information out, because they give all that information out. And that's for somebody, so as a stranger. So if I have sinful intents, and your children are sitting here just posting every picture of them and all of this information, they present to themselves a danger that maybe they're not thinking about, right? The other one is, if you think about from a teenage perspective, right? So here you are, your information is being sold, your information is being gathered. What does that matter? Well, they're selling all of your information for money. Every bit of the information that you have out there is being packaged together and sold so they can market to you more. Everything that you do, every website that you go to, it's being tracked. It's being tracked with tracking cookies by multiple different vendors. And so you go to a website, and let's say that as an adult, you might be searching for a vacuum cleaner. And then you go on Facebook an hour later. You know what ad you're going to see in the middle of Facebook? One for a vacuum cleaner, right? Because they know that you were searching vacuum cleaners. They will show you pictures of the very same vacuum cleaner that you were researching to try to convince you to purchase it. Facebook's making piles of money on repackaging and sending this and bombarding you with this information. You might think, well, this is harmless, right? But as you're being constantly tracked, as this is constantly going on, a profile is being built of who you are, and it's being sold, packaged and sold. And what's going on is, when you post these pictures, when you post this information, nothing goes away ever, right? The generations before the internet, right? Their worst moments, the stupidest things they did, right? There's not evidence of those things, right? And so God has forgiven them if they have repented of them. But in this generation, when these things get posted online, while yes, maybe I've repented, I'm sorry I did that, I have asked God for forgiveness, but I never can get away from that ever, because it's out there and it never goes away. And it doesn't matter what privacy settings you put, like privacy settings are a joke. They constantly change, they're ineffective, and really it's just, they want to give you enough control to make you feel like that you're actually controlling your well-being, and you're not. And so with this social media, with what's going on, nothing's going away ever, and they're using you. You are being manipulated, and you're being manipulated to make more money. And so I want to spend a little time talking to you how it works, right? So how social media actually manipulates you. And so I'm going to, at the very end of this, I'm going to post in the chat line, and I'm also going to give it to Scott and whomever else, a list of links. And there's some videos that I would suggest, if you're interested in this, that you go and look. And one of them was really eye-opening about how TikTok worked. And so as you're being manipulated, they being social media, make money based on how long you are on their platform. So it's in their best interest to make you stay on that platform as long as they possibly can. And so they use all manner of algorithms to keep you engaged. So when you go to YouTube, as an example, and you're watching that first video, and you go search for something, or you click on a link that took you to YouTube, and you're watching that first video. And then you know how on the right-hand side, there's that whole list of videos that queues up next to autoplay, those recommendations. So right now, YouTube's running about 70% of the videos that people watch on YouTube come from the recommendation engine. That's a pretty significant amount, but they're sending you stuff that you want to see. When you look at TikTok, now YouTube is owned by Google. They purchased them for an inordinate sum of money some number of years ago. TikTok. So if you're not familiar with what TikTok is, and you should ask your team. And here's what TikTok is. Ultimately, TikTok is it's a social media platform that consists of exclusively videos, short clip videos that are about some sort of a subject. Some of them are, goofy, funny. Some of them are about animals. Some of them are but some of them are really, really dark. And some of them are, and so anything and everything you want to find exists on TikTok. TikTok is owned by a company in China called ByteDance, and they hold their algorithm very close. They don't release how it works. And so one of the links I'm going to send you is kind of a study how it works, but their recommendation gets people to watch 90 to 95% of the videos you watch on TikTok come through the recommendation engine. So they are controlling what you're watching. And the way that they get you hooked, the way that they get you to stay on their platform is to show you what you want to see, what's more and more compelling, what you're more and more interested in, and what you're more and more vulnerable to. It will get more extreme, and they will drive you down this rabbit hole until they can get you into where it's difficult for you to even get away from it. You can't stay away. So for instance, right, so as you're going through, I'm just going to use TikTok as an example. Instagram works almost the exact same way. It's a slightly different algorithm. But as you're scrolling through TikTok and you're watching these videos, you start watching a video. And so it looks at how long did you look at that video for? Did you only watch 3 seconds of it and scroll by? Did you watch almost the whole thing? Did you watch it twice? Did you scroll back to it? So every one of those things tells it what is drawing your attention and it's using. So now it knows, here's what engages you. And so you may say, I don't want to see this anymore. But if you watch those videos, it's going to continue to serve up more and more extreme content. So you might think, you might be in a bad place. Teenage angst is not called teenage angst for nothing. It's because teenagers go through situations where they feel bad, or they feel depressed, or they have self-image issues, right? And so if you watch a depressing content and you see that, right, and TikTok determines, hey, they're watching these depressing videos. Do you know what's going to be served up to you? More depressing videos. Further depressing videos about self-harm. Maybe you weren't considering self-harm, but now you're concerned about somebody. So you watch now you're being filled with videos about self-harm, right? You may have self-image issues, and you may suddenly start seeing videos where people are talking about the first time that they started to engage in anorexia or bulimia. And so, and how it made them feel. And so it's encouraging some of that behavior. Now, TikTok doesn't necessarily want to make you depressed or make you become bulimic. What it wants you to do is it wants you to stay engaged, because the longer that you stay engaged, the more they can charge for ads, the more ads they can show you, the more money they can make. It's not for your benefit, it's for their benefit. And the same thing is true, right? So they want you to be on there as much as you possibly can. You can say, I don't like it. And so it may not even be content that you like the most, but it's going to serve up to you the content that is most likely to make you stay on the platform. And if that content is sinful, if that content is harmful, it doesn't care. It's going to serve it up to you. And so as teens, you are susceptible to it, and have to realize as adults, we're susceptible to it. And we're being served up this content, right? So there was and I'll share the link, but there was a study that Facebook owns Instagram, by the way. So Facebook is the app of old people, right? The only people who use Facebook on a regular basis are old people. And that doesn't mean that teenagers might not have a Facebook account, but it's very infrequent. Facebook is where your grandmother goes on there and likes the pictures that are posted on there. Facebook is where people who are my age are reconnecting with their friends from high school and whatnot. That's what Facebook is all about. And so, but Facebook decides they bought Instagram, and they don't really want that association to be known because Facebook's not as cool. So we're going to have Instagram being separate, and it's more focused towards young folks. So now you have Instagram, and Instagram, Facebook's own study determined that they were having that it was causing issues because of the content that was being served up. Specifically, one study showed that teen girls were suffering from depression, from issues of self-image, self-esteem, and even leading to self-harm. Now, we could spend the whole class talking about what Instagram does or what TikTok does, but I want everybody to understand social media, you are being manipulated so they can make more money, and it's to your loss, right? So social media by its very design is addictive. That's what it is. So I want to ask you a question. I want you to think for a moment. You can, and then you can go look. I want you to think, how many times do you check your phone a day? How many times do you check your phone an hour? Hourly? More than once an hour? I mean, every 10 minutes? How long is it between? And so when you think about that, like there are digital well-being, there's all sorts of things that the Android and iPhone platforms provide you to go find out how many times you've unlocked your phone, how many hours you spent on certain apps. I would suggest you go and look at that, because while we're talking about this impacting teens, this impacts adults just the same, right? It prevents us from having real engagement with real people. And the purpose is they want to make it addictive. The app, the content provides delight. It's a dopamine rush. You're on there, you post something, how many likes did I get? Oh, look, this one really got a bunch of likes. Look at how many shares I got. Look at how many friends that I have, right? And so I post a picture and nobody likes it and I feel bad, right? So the app provides me delight and it provides me that positive stimulation that I want, right? But I get so much of it that in turn, I become desensitized. It diminishes my ability to actually enjoy it. And so then the more that I seek what I'm looking for, the more that it actually eludes me, the more that I'm on their content. I'm hungry for the next like or the next share or more friends. So there's a book here, Your Teenager is Not Crazy. And I would recommend that you consider looking at that book. It's an interesting book. It's I don't know if you can see it there, but anyways, I'll post a link to it. And there's a chapter in there that talks about the addictive nature of technology. And so these are 6 characteristics of an activity is addictive. And I want you to think about how this applies to you and or your teen, right? So the activity provides pleasure and gives relief from unpleasant emotions, right? So it's an escape. I'm tired. I don't want to deal with this. And I like hanging out there. It's relaxing to me, right? It requires increasing activity to satisfy. A few minutes aren't enough. I need to spend more time. I end up spending increasing more and more time in this activity, right? It makes a person feel uncomfortable or distressed when access is denied. I just experienced this last night with my daughter. We have a bedtime set on her phone. She was talking with somebody that she met at Foundations, and she was communicating back and forth, and she wanted to continue to carry this conversation on, but we have a bedtime. And so I acquiesced, I gave in, I gave her a little bit more time. But then finally, when I had cut her off, then she's uncomfortable. She was distressed because access was denied. Like, I'm seeing these traits in my own children, right? Do you see them in yourself or your children, right? Does it create conflict with people or life responsibilities? Like, hey, can you take out the trash? Yeah, hang on one moment. Let me finish watching this 75th video I've watched in a row, right? Or I can't even carry on a conversation at the dinner table because my head's down. We were at dinner the other night and we were looking and there was a family and every single one of them had their head down in their phone. Nobody was talking, no one, right? Does that create conflict? Well, maybe not then, but certainly there's not a great deal of interaction there. It becomes difficult to set aside despite attempts to do so, right? So just set your phone to the side. Okay, I put it to the side. I can't, 30 seconds later, I'm picking it back up to see if I have another alert, another like, another message, right? It becomes difficult to set aside. And ultimately, it ends up dominating my life, both in what I do and what I think about. If these things exist, this is an addictive, this means you are addicted, right? And so Christians obviously recognize the dangers and the sin of addiction when it comes to any manner of other substances, right? We need to recognize the addictive nature, that this is affecting our ability to think and interact with other individuals. We're no longer being sober-minded, so to speak, right? And so social media is influencing us. And when I'm reminded about influence, I can't help but think of 1 Corinthians 15:33. Be not deceived. Evil company corrupts good morals, right? And when we're out there and we're on social media, the rabbit holes that we get drawn down are not usually the ones that are good. We end up being drawn down areas that are not good for us. Now, I'm going to give you an example of this that you may have seen, and this isn't, so there are, anytime you look at data, there's two concepts. There's correlation and causation. And correlation, you put two things together, they may or may not cause the other one. Causation is for sure. And I would like to submit to you that I think that there is both a correlative and a causative effect of social media and the internet upon society. And because what it does is it magnifies what society's movement is, right? So I may not have known about what was going on, 100 years ago. I may not have known what was going on the West Coast. I may not have known what was going on in a different state. But now I know exactly what's going on, and they're trending and they're going viral. And so I want to show you a statistic. So when we look at evil company corrupts good morals, how does this actually influence young people? Well, I want you to look at this. This is startling to me. This is LGBT statistics by generation. When you look at what I refer to as the silent generation, Gallup here refers to it as the traditionalist generation, right? Look at the percentage. Like, it's 1% identify in one of these LGBT categories. 1%. Of the boomers, it's 2%. Right? Even in Gen X, right? So it took a pretty big jump there, but not enormous, right? So we're a little more than the boomers. The millennials, right? You start seeing a pretty good clip. Like, you have 9% of millennials identify as LGBT. Or you think about 9%, that's almost 1 in 10 that you're looking around of that generation that was born between 1981 and 1996, almost 1 in 10 identify in some respect in one of these categories. Look at what happened in Gen Z. Now, this is the next generation that grew up solely and entirely around social media, right? That's their life here, right? And 17.2% is, if I added those up correctly, of Gen Z. Now, is there, when you think about what influences someone towards the LGBT lifestyle, right? It's not genetic, right? And even if someone thought it was genetic, which it's not, it's pretty clear looking at these generations here that these folks, it wasn't genetic then, so suddenly everybody's genes are changing. No, what's happening is as society proclaims, praises, celebrates, right? It becomes more and more acceptable and attractive to teens to, consider that. Maybe I am. And so I begin to watch some of these videos. I begin to see these contents. I follow these pages. I look at these social media influencers and I start seeing them. There was a book called Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters. And there was a statistic in here that startled me. And it was between 2016 and 2017. So it's a few years old on it's only gotten worse. The number of gender surgeries for females who are born female in the United States quadrupled. In the UK, rates of gender dysphoria for teenage girls were up 4,400% over the previous decade. Now, do you think that that's happening? Why? I would submit to you it's because of the bombardment of these messages that are hitting our teens, right? It's whether it be music, whether it be media, but the main media that's being consumed right now, right? So in the 80s, there was this big push, what movies and what the ratings were and music, and put these labels on this music. Yeah, that's because they recognize that what you put into your mind, right? It's not, so like when Jesus was talking, he says, he was talking with them about what they put into their mouth versus what comes out. It's not what goes into the mouth that defiles a man, but what comes out of the abundance of the heart. right? And so when we fill our hearts and minds with things that are contrary to God's word, then what's going to happen is we're going to sympathize with that. There's a saying, and I should have looked it up, but I like it. It's what one generation tolerates, the next generation embraces. And so if we tolerate sin, the next generation will embrace it, praise it, laud it. There are some other things that we need to consider. When you're on social media, there's grooming that goes on. This is where an individual will find usually it's not always females, it can be males, but they will find pictures and compliment those pictures and compliment them and engage them in conversation. And so what teenage girl doesn't want to hear how pretty she is? And so then they begin to be groomed, and they begin to and they comment on the pictures that are perhaps the most inappropriate. Like I'm on social media, and I see, most of my friends, the gross majority of my friends are New Testament Christians. But then I see pictures of end of the year celebrations, or I see the pictures of proms, or I see the pictures of, and I see the attire that's going on, and I can see how that, and then when individuals see those, the comments that are being made, they make me really uncomfortable, the pictures and the comments. And so then grooming comes on. And so one scheme that's going on is where they'll get just one picture, right? And then, so they say, listen, if I'm going to send this picture to all of your friends, I'm going to send it to your parents, I'm going to send it to everybody at your school, whatever it may be, if you don't send me another picture, but this time I want a better picture. And this better picture is not a better picture, it's a far worse picture. And then that just continues down this path of further blackmail to get more pictures and more leverage over that. Now, you may think, oh, my child would never fall for that. Well, perhaps that might be the case. Let's say that your child is far too impervious to this type of behavior that's going on, right? Well, there's something that's called deep fakes, and it has been increasing in prevalence. What a deep fake is where they take a picture, multiple pictures of your face, and they then wrap that face through technology upon a live video or a movie or something along those lines. And you saw some of that being used. If anyone watched one of the last Star Wars movies, Luke Skywalker walks in and he's a much younger man. Or no, actually it wasn't that. It was the Mandalorian series, where he walks in and he's a much younger man. And the reason why he's a much younger man, he wasn't a much younger man. They use technology to do this. Well, this exists openly. And so I'll share a link at the end of this discussion here where you can see an article about how people are using it. What they do is they take lots and lots of pictures of individuals and some video and those kind of clips, and then they put those faces upon inappropriate pictures or inappropriate videos. And then they say, listen, if you don't do X, I'm going to show everybody this picture or this video. And what happens is they leverage. And if your teens don't feel comfortable talking to you about situations that they're put in, and they're left to resolve it for themselves, it's going to be really difficult for them to get through that. So as we look at the issues that exist with technology, right there, it's not that technology is inherently bad. It's not that technology is inherently good. It is a tool. It is a reflection of society around us. And unfortunately, when we look at society around us, there is far more individuals who ascribe to a godless worldview than ascribe to a godly worldview. And so as parents and as teens, right? So parents need to protect their children, and teens need to guard their hearts, right? You think about Joseph, and you think about the situation that he was put in with Potiphar's wife, right? And what he did and how he behaved, right? And he ran. Now she, she just nagged and continued to beg and to plead and to try to convince him over and over. And he ran from the situation. He didn't say, well, let me think that he ran from the situation. And so as parents, we have an obligation to make sure that we protect our children in those situations. And the children, the teens, like, our goal is to get to heaven. Our goal is to spend eternity in heaven with God, not to find ourselves ensnared in sin in the world. So this is, for the time that we have left, there's a few things that I want to talk about on suggestions. And this is going to be a brief section of this lesson, because you could spend hours on all of them. But when you look at some of the suggestions, the first one is, as a parent, and this is not going to be popular with your teen, but you need to know every single password. You need to know every single app. You need to know every place they go, and you need to look regularly, and not when you're suspicious. And this isn't because I don't trust you. This isn't because I want to be up. It's because I am here to guide you as a parent, guiding you as you're working your way through maturity to adulthood, helping you make it through life, right? So my parents, when I was a kid, this was before cell phones, right? Or at least before the advent of carrying your pocket cell phones. So my parents had to know, my rule was, where were you at? Whose house were you at? Where was that address? What was that phone number? So my parents knew where I was at and knew how to get a hold of me. They knew where I was at. They knew what I was doing. Well, in a virtual sense, that's the obligation that we as parents have today to our teens. We know where they're at, when they're there, where they're going, and what they're exposed to, right? My parents would know whose house I was going over to. They would know who I was going to be around, right? So by knowing every password, it's freeing, because your children, like, I don't want to share my passwords. Why do you need to see that? I don't want you to know what those things are, right? What are you trying to hide? It's not like, don't go into my bedroom. You're not allowed to look under the mattress. Ignore what I've put between the mattress and my bed. No, this is my house and you're my child. And so as a parent, you have to know, you need to know, like, I can't stress this enough. You need to know what your child or children is exposed to, and set that precedent early, knowing what their passwords are, knowing every app that they're using, every place that they're going, who their friends are, what their text messages are, and look regularly. So it's not like, oh, I'm never looking, and then when I'm suspicious, then I'm looking, and it causes a big fight and it's blown up. Don't do it that way. Like, I'm here to guide you. Tell me about who you were talking to. Tell me about so-and-so. Tell me about, like, engaged, involved in your children's life. The next is to know how to secure and monitor. That's a whole class in of itself, but go do some research to find out how to secure and to monitor those applications, and how to know how to protect them and to identify when something is happening. You need to have regular, open conversations. If every little thing that they ever do is wrong and you blow up, they're not going to come to you and talk to you and confide in you to help you go through the situation. But I would submit to the teens, your parents have lived through a very similar situation than whatever you're going through. Go and talk with them, and they will help you guide. Because if your goal is to get to heaven and your parents' goal is to return you to God, then work together. And as parents, what I would submit to you is, trust your children, but verify. Trust your children, but verify, and be very involved, very, very involved. Now, I have run 50 minutes of my 45-minute presentation, so I have already run over my allotted time. And so I have a whole host of links that I'll provide. I'm not sure what the best way to provide them to you is. I could put them in the chat section here. In fact, I can stop the share real quick. I I can copy and paste them in the chat session so most people will have a quick access to them. And then I can also email them to Scott and he can provide them to whomever would like to have them accordingly. I don't know. I'm glad to stay on here and talk. I don't know what, Scott, I'll defer to you on how you would suggest that we proceed. I'm certainly glad to take a question or two, but I think that if there's a bunch of people who want to ask a whole bunch of questions, what I would suggest is that you direct those questions to Scott or one of the elders or to Tucker, and then those can be assembled together. And then I can look through those and try to, design the next session to answer your types of questions and to make it valuable to you and not just sitting here listening to me drone on about the world of social media. And I can only direct message Tucker. I can't send a message to everybody else. So here, Tucker, I'll send you the giant list and then you can send it out to everybody, or I can't even paste it there. Yeah, I'll have to send it to Scott.
Chad, if you'll do that, I'll bounce it straight over to Tucker, and he can make those links available to everybody who wants them. I would say, just quickly watching the participant number at the bottom, we've really not lost anybody. Chad, thank you. This has been a tremendous session, in my opinion, to get us rolling. I want to defer to Tucker, but you and I had talked about the possibility of launching the idea of questions. I think that's great. I don't know we'd have time for them next week, but I think I'd have a question or two, but mine are not as important as parents and the kids on here. Chad, I reach out to Chad and say, which app should I use to store my passwords on my iPhone? And he always helps with things like that. Tucker, our thoughts had been open it up for questions. Do you like the idea of either folks on the call or anybody that may listen later to say, hey, I've got one, hand it to you, hand it to one of the elders, and us get those down to check?
Scott, if you want, we can take a few questions, and if it gets overwhelming, then I don't want to hold people here. I want to be mindful and respectful of people's time, but I'm perfectly fine, going for a few more minutes and answering any questions. And if folks have some questions, I can talk. Okay, that'll be a long conversation. We can table that, and maybe I can answer some easy questions or something along those lines. Or perhaps there was something I said that was, unclear and needs some clarification.
Hey, Tucker, if you're good with that, let's open it up. And if you have a question, unmute yourself on the microphone at the bottom, or if you're audio, *6 and ask away.
How would you, okay, so, all right, so someone asked from a parent, how would you handle when your child is friends with another child who their parents are not monitoring their tech at all? Yeah, so I would say it's not, there's not a cut and dry answer. It's kind of like, how would you handle letting your child go over to a house where you know that they're not Christians, and what kind of, what level of behavior? When you say there's no monitoring of tech, right? So I think you can set expectations to your child, and some of that is trust and some of it's verify. And if depending on each child, depending on the age and the parents, you can talk potentially with the parents, but maybe you don't go over to that person's house. Maybe they come to your house, because when they're at your house, right, then what's going on, what is engaged, right? So I know there were people who my parents didn't want me to go and hang out at their house, right? So my parents' preference was that people come over to our house, and that's what we did. Now, not all the time. I was over at people's house, but I think in that instance, we have to protect and guard our children, and this is one instance. And I don't know that I would say you can never go over there, but I would certainly encourage having them be at your house. Or maybe have a conversation with the parents of that child who aren't monitoring their kid at all. Is there any way to prevent being tracked? Well, yes and no. So I'm not going to present a class on how to evade your parents. That would be unwise of me. If you mean tracked by big tech, that's a different type of track. So I guess I need to understand what tracking you're in reference to so I can answer the question, because it's very different answers. Tucker, can you ask whoever that person was to clarify from big tech? Okay. Yeah, so here's the answer. Almost no. Don't use a smartphone. Because, for instance, I'll give you some examples. If I hang out with Scott, my phone tells its location to Google or Apple. Now, some of these things you can turn off, but some of you can't turn off. And so then it'll associate me and Scott together. Now it knows that Scott is an avid tennis player, right? And so then it knows that, and so I'm likely to be interested in tennis as well. Now, I'm not interested in tennis, and I don't know that Scott's interested in tennis, but is there a way to avoid being tracked? You can limit some of it, but it's really like you're standing at the wall of the dike and you're trying to keep all the water back. You can't. I mean, you can limit some of it, but as long as you're engaged with the smartphone, every website you go to, I mean, you can't even use an Android phone without logging in with a Google account, right? And that's not by accident. Somebody says, I've heard a lot about Bark. Is one monitoring program better than the other? Yeah, there are some that are bad. I mean, when I say bad, not worth the money, not effective. And some of them are good. When I say good, I mean helpful. I don't mean effective. There is not a single tool that will be completely effective in helping you monitor. All of these products can be bypassed by the teens. And so that's where you have to work together. It's kind of, sometimes people will talk about covenant eyes, which is predominantly around looking at protecting individuals from pornography, but you can just turn that off. Now, yeah, you can identify they've turned it off, but there are lots and lots of ways around it. So is Bark helpful? I think it is helpful, and I think it could be considered, but there's pros and cons to lots of different products, and there's some pros to Bark, but there's also cons. And so I don't have this is the one you want to use. Like I can talk some about what I do for my children, but I mean, I'm in information technology and information security. So the things that I do personally, I do them because there's not adequate protection in its entirety from a technical standpoint. So I have to do some additional things. So we're an Android family. And so I use Google Family Link is what I use to be able to monitor. It controls every website that my children go to. I whitelist that. That means that they can't go to a website without asking me permission to go to any website. I control what apps that they download. And then, and so now my daughter's 14. So there's a big difference between a 10-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 17-year-old. So some of these things have to be age appropriate as you're working through. How do you effectively secure and monitor? That's an easy question. I can answer that in about 10 seconds. We're going to have a whole class on how do you effectively secure and monitor. Like that is a tremendous subject to talk about. Like we can talk about everything from, well, I'm not even going to get started on that. So a lot of it has to be, you have to be mindful. You have to be aware and researching things on how to properly secure and handle. So there's some techniques and or tactics that I can suggest to parents. And some of them, I think that you should be completely open with your children that this is what you're doing. And I think that, mom has eyes in the back of her head, like that saying is there because like kids don't, mom's watching, dad's watching, and they don't necessarily need to be told, I'm looking at you right now. And so sometimes it's good to trust, but verify, and that verify is the monitoring side of things. So you want to protect them as much as you can. But, there was a saying that I saw right before we had children, and it was, do not prepare the path for the child, prepare the child for the path. And that doesn't mean, well, there's some caveats to that. Don't throw your child out there unprotected and go, well, I told them what they should do and it's on them. Like, no. But also, you can't go through life and protect them from ever seeing or hearing anything or being exposed to anything. You have to train them how to be in the world, but not of the world. Are there certain apps, social media platforms that are more dangerous than others? Yes. So like I would say that TikTok, in my estimation right now, is probably the most addictive. And it also is the most prone to driving people down into the most extreme content. And so ask me tomorrow and that may change. Today, right now, I would say TikTok is probably, like I said, the most addictive and the most dangerous. Yeah, there are some that are not as dangerous. So like Facebook is bad. Like they all have issues, right? But with Facebook, they do a better job of keeping out porn. But I'll give you an example. On Facebook, I happen to be, there was Britney Spears' father has a conservatorship over her. It's caught my attention because her father is an attorney at a law firm that I'm familiar with in Florida. So I looked up something about the conservatorship for Britney Spears. Because I Googled Britney Spears, now my Facebook tries to show me Britney Spears videos on a regular basis. I don't care to watch Britney Spears videos, but Facebook tries to give it to me. So while it's not serving me up porn, it's certainly serving me up inappropriate videos that I don't want to see or need to see. So yeah, so there are some that are dangerous. Instagram, there are significant issues with Instagram. But like there was and I was trying to find the study, and I had mentioned it to Scott. There was a report that I read where they had started up an Instagram account. They posted a few pictures, liked some popular social media influencers, and they waited to see how long it was before they were approached and propositioned, and it was frighteningly short, the time frame. I couldn't find that in time for this presentation, but it can happen in any of them. And there are things that you can do to make Instagram a little safer. There are things you can do to make Facebook a little safer. But I mean, honestly, I downloaded TikTok. I got on it just so I could see what it was like when it came out a while, it's been out for a while. And in a very, very, very short order of, 15 videos, I had been exposed to sad content, inappropriate content, funny content. They were trying to get me to whatever. And it just kept showing me like these different genres. And so it kept trying to show me, hoping that I would click on or rewatch a inappropriate video. And after I had seen a couple videos, I'm like, this is not what I want to fill my brain with. And so I deleted the app. So I would say if I had to pick the worst, I would say TikTok is the worst in my estimation today. But you can find just about anything on all of them. So it doesn't mean that Facebook is safe and Twitter is not quite as bad. I mean, you can find bad stuff on all of them. Are you still typing, Tucker? We have more?
No, I don't have another question here.
Well, I'm glad to answer your questions. If you guys, as you sit through and think about what questions that you might have, please take those and get those to the leadership there. And then what I can do is I can try to present the next class to answer those questions and cover some more of those other issues. So.
Chad, thank you. This has been excellent, and we are indebted to you. We will Tucker and I'll talk about the process for those questions. We'll get those to you. And I know it's 8:36 in Central Florida. We thank you for giving us a significant part of your evening. It's been
No, I'm glad to help in whatever way I can. So, Scott, and I'll send an email to you with all of those links. I would recommend people peruse those links, especially the first link on how TikTok's algorithm works. It's
Chad, I don't think you and I talked about this on the phone, but last Sunday we had copies available of a Wall Street Journal article from this past Thursday. It was a front pager on TikTok. The Journal, I think it opened 31 accounts maybe. And
yeah,
you probably saw that. And it was kind of part of our announcement when we played your video about this class. And, there were several who I've never been on TikTok. I certainly don't know much about it at all, but a lot of people do. And to your point, it is right in the face of a lot of people we love. So this has been very helpful to me.
well, thank you, sir. Well, everyone, you have a good evening. I guess I'll turn over to you guys. I don't know if you want to dismiss in a prayer, and then we'll resume next week.
Yeah, I can close us out with a prayer. Just wanted to reiterate, thank you so much, Chad, for being here. And thank you all for joining the meeting as well. I'll close us out in prayer here. Father, we thank you so much for this day. We thank you again for the time to be together. We thank you for Chad for his preparation and delivering this class for us, Father. Please bless him and his family. God bless us all and help us to be diligent to guard our hearts and guard our children's hearts and guard the church, the body of Christ, Father. Help us to be careful with the things that we're putting in our mind. Father, thank you so much for Jesus. We pray this in his name. Amen.